Welcome to Black Hat 2024. My name is Todd Tiemann. I'm a senior analyst with the Enterprise Strategy Group. And we're here today with a panel of CISOs and security leaders to talk about discovering and protecting sensitive data and the relationship between security in the CISO and the data protection officer or the data governance function within the enterprise. Because frequently there can be collaboration, but there can also be some tension. And we're here to explore how to optimize and make that relationship work. Thanks for joining. We're going to be sharing some wisdom, and let's dive into it because I want to introduce some folks here. Let me start with Brett Price. Brett is a leader for AccessIT's virtual CISO program and holds a bunch of industry certifications. CISO, CISSP, CISM, CISA. Brett's cybersecurity journey spans over 2 decades, so you're a grizzled veteran here, in mid and large enterprises. You started out in the trenches, if I understand things correctly, as a system administrator and network architect, and then moved into security leadership positions. You have a deep-rooted understanding of the cyber business risk, governance, and frameworks ranging from NIST CSF to ISO 27001, 27005, GDPR, and CIS V8. And you helped establish cybersecurity programs and narratives for enterprises. Next up, we have Matt Murphy. And Matt is a lead DevOps engineer and cybersecurity architect at Beyond Finance. Matt guides the design and implementation of a zero trust architecture focused on various cybersecurity disciplines such as web application security, data and cloud security management, and a network detection response. So very well-rounded portfolio there. Matt leads innovative IT projects including cloud strategy, IT transformation planning, and application modernization, helping enterprises align the IT roadmaps with the business strategies. And then Toby. We have Toby Foss, who's a senior director for information security at Informatica, a Fortune 500 company based in California. Toby's got 25 plus years in IT experience in multi-cloud environments, has led several products through FedRAMP certifications. He's based in Colorado and holds a BS in computer engineering from the South Dakota School of Mines and an MS in MIS from the University of Maryland. He's actually going for his PhD right now, so pretty soon we're going to be talking about Dr. Toby Foss. And he gives back by mentoring high school students in cybersecurity. So gentlemen, did I get that right? Miss anything?
That's great.
Fantastic.
We sound impressive.
Woohoo! Well, you are impressive. We're going to get some great insights here. But let me get started with a kickoff question here. And it relates to the relationship and the blurring of the lines between CISOs and chief data officers or CDOs or whoever might have that data governance function within the enterprise. And with the roles of CISOs and chief data officers increasingly overlapping, particularly in the realm of data protection and recent breaches, there can be some friction in terms of a shared goal of safeguarding that enterprise data. Now, let me kick things off with Toby. What are some of the things your organization's doing to stay aligned and optimize that data security?
I think the first thing to note is that there's a lot of external pressure coming from the SEC and from compliance that is kind of acting as the driver or the motivator that's driving this kind of push to understand our data, where we're getting it from, who's processing it, where it's coming from. And that push has also put a lot of pressure on the people that are traditionally trying to protect the data and trying to manage and operate that data. So I think understanding those external pressures, as well as kind of that interpersonal relationship of how we're going to work to meet a common goal. Ultimately, we're out there to protect our customers' data, to protect the company, and understanding like the important parts of what it is we're doing and kind of all aligning on that end goal of doing what's right for the company and doing what's right for our customers. It does cause tension. It does cause kind of some high pressure situations where you have to kind of take a step back and say, what's the right answer, not whose ego is going to be bruised or whose answer is going to be listened to.
Brett, Matt, anything add or subtract there?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is this is one of those perfect examples of not only unity but breaking down silos within the organization. You know, it's like what Toby said, the pressures of new regulations like SEC. We really need to get together and understand that common goal. And as cybersecurity moves from a bottom up to a top down approach, it's really critical to break down those silos, work together, and handle it on a unified front from a data perspective. Because at the end of the day, data in general, 98% of the time, is our crown jewel, regardless of the business that we're in. So, understanding the data side of it and understanding the cybersecurity side of it and putting those two together, I think, is critical.
Yeah, and the only thing I probably would touch on really quick is the other pressure that we are increasingly seeing is the hacker activity, right? I think in 2022 to 2023, dedicated e-crime organizations went up almost 20%, right? So you have the evolution of going from the data center to the hybrid cloud to, seeing a lot of cloud-first organizations now, the increase in the threat vectors, the increase in the access, right? Like, so we're continuing to go faster and faster, and I feel like in general, I don't know what these guys have seen, but that data asset management, data classification has never been an easy problem to have, right? So as technology is increasing in velocity, as hackers and activity are increasing in velocity, and then also just trying to have the visibility into all the things, we continue to see a lot more stress and pressure and a lot more hacker activity just across the board.
It's, one thing that Enterprise Strategy published around 2 months ago was research around data governance. And we asked a question, what are your priorities? And people could give multiple answers, but the lead answer for everybody was data protection.
Yeah.
And this is the data governance folks saying
Yeah.
data protection. 20% of them said this is the #1 thing for me. So I think there's some congruence, some commonality. But what about the threat that you mentioned? Is your experience been the data governance function, the data protection officer, they get that? That's top of mind for them also? Or is that something you have to do some education around?
I feel like it's going to vary quite a bit depending on the organization. And I've had the opportunity to be both the consultant, I've been the person running security, I've been the person selling products. So depending on the sophistication of the organization, I think also there's a lot to be said for the more governance you are under, typically the more motivated the leadership is. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but so it's really going to vary quite a bit, from organizations that, really, really big financial services organizations totally get it, have an incredibly vested interest, typically are, I think there's always a little bit of layer 8 fun, for lack of a better term, that above the tech people managing or navigating. But I think I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, I think data security that's all well and good. You can say my primary goal is data security, but I think the art in it is identification and classification. So data is scattered so many different places.
Yeah.
The cloud, on-prem, endpoints, wherever you have it. So being able to identify that data and then classify it, because not all data is equal, right? Yeah. So I think that's the challenge. And then once we identify that data that's business critical, then we apply the security function and apply that protection around that critical data.
I wanted to add one more point, is that data is now ephemeral. You can look at something today and say, nope, that one's secure, we don't have to do anything with it. And if you look at it tomorrow, that's changed. And so not only are we having to put the controls and the classifications and the understand what's where, but we have to continually do it. It's not a one and done thing, it's an ongoing challenge.
And so we're all sort of level set on some definitions, because you raised the topic of data classification, and that relates to data security posture management, which is one of the topics we're going to cover. And let me define that just so those watching have the context, and we're on the same page. And in its essence, DSPM, or Data Security Posture Management, is improving data security across your environment, both on-premises and in the cloud, by continuously monitoring, identifying vulnerabilities, and helping ensure controls around that those sensitive data stores. It's about discovering those sensitive data stores, classifying the data within them, and assessing risks to improve that data security posture and ensure compliance on an ongoing basis. And that's to the point you made, Toby. It's not a one and done. It's an ongoing sort of thing. Now, almost every enterprise has existing data discovery and classification tools, particularly when it comes to data governance. How is DSPM related to those existing tools? Is it doing something the same? Is it doing something different? What's your experience been in that regards? And let me direct that one to Matt.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it's going to really depend, right? There's so many new platforms. There's so many new things coming out. So, and even if you take a look at like these guys were talking about, data is everywhere. So the thing that might have been great in your data center that could take a look at your NAS and your SAN is probably not going to plug into your Snowflake or your Salesforce or things like that. And then personally, I think we're seeing a lot of evolution and pressure on the big platforms to be a lot more performant around security. And I think if you take a look at the iteration of a new company, somebody comes out with a new product, typically they're just really focused on, hey, this is my business value. These are the things that I can do to help increase the velocity of your business. I won't say that security is an afterthought, because that would probably not be very nice, not very generous thing to say. But oftentimes oftentimes the person that is setting up a data platform is not necessarily a security expert. Mm-hmm. Depending on the maturity of the organization, you could have a really, really mature architecture review board. You could have the chance to kind of sit down. I would imagine you see quite a bit, Brett, depending on who you're VC-soing for. Probably organizations that took the time, got it right, really spent the time, and organizations that are like, wow, we really need to get our hooks into this platform and make sure that we have the right visibility, the right governance, the right security settings. So I think it's definitely been a challenge, and a lot of it's just going to depend on the maturity of the organization.
Yeah, I don't see a whole lot of organizations that took the time, slowed down, and did it right. I mean, the effort is there, right?
Yeah.
But you don't know what you don't know. So, and data is being dumped so rapidly that it's next to impossible to keep up with. So, a data security posture management, we're at that point now where we've learned that it's not just a personal thing. It's not just a financial thing. It's not just a big, large organization thing. It's coming down to data, and it's coming down to the monetization of the data for the threat actors, and that's where it is. And now we're starting to take a step back, I think, from that big cloud adoption boom where everybody was just pushing terabytes of data into the cloud. Now we're taking a step back and saying, okay, where are our misconfigurations, and where is our data, and what data is out there, and now the regulations, GDPR and HIPAA and financial credit card data, now we really have to know where all that data is. So.
Yeah, I would say that probably the biggest thing, like the biggest so what, like the compelling reason for the DSPM space is validation, right? Mm-hmm. Oftentimes in the past, we were leveraging things like audit. You're kind of trusting that the people that are building the platforms understand, but a lot of times that's not necessarily their expertise. So just depending on the maturity of the organization, I think that all of us have probably been on a data project and figured out some things along the way. Like sometimes everybody learned some things that they didn't necessarily know, or there was some data in a lower environment that you're like, oh wow, this really should be test data. This should not be, actual data. So.
I was going to add that we move at the speed of business.
Yep.
If you take too long to spend too much time in architecture trying to plan for every eventuality, you can actually hamper and stop the project from working.
Yeah, that's a good
It just
point.
won't be successful. So a lot of times we're putting product out there, we're putting out use cases that are not even fully developed yet. But then by the time the actual need comes in, or even just a few years ago, we were never looking at AI as a possible use case.
Yep.
And now AI is everywhere.
Yep.
So your original use case and your original design may not hold up to the test of time or scalability. I've seen the size and the amount of data and the amount of compute going against it just explode in the last few years, and I really see no indication that it's going to stop anytime soon.
Yep.
To that point, one of the things when I talk to my network CISOs and the industry, there's a lot of data classification or discovery tools that are out there, but they grew up to a great degree with a focus on on-prem. And now and sometimes that's a homegrown tool. We actually did some surveying and about to publish some research, and like 30%, 38% were using homegrown tools, but those can be brittle and break, and they're focused on on-prem rather than both on-prem and cloud. Is that been your experience, or is that at odds with your experience?
Working for a company that started out on-prem and has moved to what we call cloud first, cloud native, the designs and the use cases that were built for on-prem don't really hold up in a cloud model. You can't just say, hey, I did it in the on-prem and it worked fine, so now I'm running it in the cloud, but we've had to reevaluate, re-engineer, sometimes rewrite our products simply so that they take advantage of all of the cool, nifty, neat features that are available in the cloud.
Yeah, like Toby mentioned, the ephemeral nature of cloud. You know, on-prem is not ephemeral, so by nature. And you know, you also have to take into consideration that when there's a market leader in just about anything, right, that we've seen, there's always companies that are almost there but not quite there, so they want to bolt it on as quick as they can to get into that market position. So the market leaders in any one of those, you know, security type resources or tools is going to lead the market in that particular thing, you know. So and that's why we have the market leaders and the people that follow behind and all. But
you know, one of the things that we found in some survey work was we asked a question around data resilience, which is the topic you mentioned, and the question was, do you want the best tool for that job with integrations to the adjacent tools, or do you want a platform? And it turned out 65% said, give me the best tool with integrations. And then about a third said, okay, I want a platform. So there's, to the point you're raising, most folks want the best tool right now because this is an emerging new problem, and they want the best tool to solve that new problem. Is what the survey work we've done has shown. Is that consistent?
I mean,
with
that can also be a double-edged sword, right? Because everybody wants single pane visibility.
Yeah.
Right.
But with single pane visibility, there's going to be some sacrifices on one end or the other, right?
Yeah.
So you may have 3 products, you know, with these tools that have multiple products give you single pane visibility, which is great. But the tools that they're just now trying to develop to fill in that single pane visibility are not as good as the market leader that's out there now, or the tool that's been there in the game forever, you know.
I use the analogy of cars. The market leaders of cars just 10 years ago were, you know, who made the nicest car, or the least amount of problems, or you know, the best handling, best driving experience. And then Tesla came along and totally disrupted the entire industry. And they were, you know, talking about range and electric and self-driving and all of these new features. And all of those previous guys that were their top of their leaders were all of a sudden playing catch up. So then a lot of new people came in trying to come up with their own AI models. Some of them, or excuse me, car models. Some of them worked with their AI. Some of them worked with new range or new features. But kind of the market kind of settles down, and you figure out who are the top ones. And really, it's not by who made 4 wheels that go down the road every time, which is really the purpose of a car. Now you're starting to be influenced by the range or the sleek design or the cool interior, but really you got to take a step back and say, I need a car that's reliable, that can get me down the road, protect my family.
Yeah, I would say oftentimes as security practitioners, we have a lot of different areas that we have to cover, right? So typically when we're doing vendor selection and determining with the product requirements, we're typically we likely would love 12 things that you can do, and we'll probably settle for 2 or 3 really well. Sometimes it's 1 if we have to. But in general, we're really trying to say, based on typically a limited number of staff and a limited number of budget, what product has the best coverage, is being forward-thinking about their development, is mature in the way that they're delivering their product. You know, you made an interesting point about a lot of the companies developing their own product. It's always a little bit of that's a catch-22 as well, because
You're talking about the homegrown tools here, yeah.
But oftentimes you have companies that are not developers of product trying to maintain a service that they may not be a primary skill set, right? So they're putting together something that potentially they don't know what they don't know relative to their own environments.
And it's distracting them from other stuff that might contribute more directly to their business success.
Definitely.
I just want to make one point real quick, because I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. You know, this is live, this is a recording or whatever. Resource constraints. You know, we have to appreciate all the organizations out there that have major resource constraints. So if they're behind, you know, it's not because of a lack of effort or a lack of knowledge or whatever. It's just you don't have the resources to cover every single angle.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why companies like mine will, you know, augment that stuff. And that wasn't a plug. It was just I didn't want anybody to feel like they were behind, but resource constraints is a major, major issue.
But to that point, rewinding to the data discovery and classification, you know, your constrained resources, if you can have one tool that can cover on-prem and cloud, that's going to be a lot more effective than, okay, I have this legacy tool for on-prem and a new one for cloud. No, that's going to be a challenge.
Exactly.
There's a benefit also to keeping people honest in that, because sometimes you will have, shadow IT is still very definitely a thing. And oftentimes, depending on the maturity of the organization and the way that you govern your environments, you may or may not, you know, somebody might be like, yeah, there's nothing over there. And then you can be like, okay, well, let me plug my DSPM tool in and I will tell you exactly what's over there. And then also, you can set it up in such a way that it will continue to learn new things as they get deployed. So you end up in that nice spot of being able to say like, okay, I have this new database and I do understand relative to the classification that I have, what the security protections I need to have, because a lot of times we don't all have the time to go follow everybody around and try to figure out what they're up to. So just having a tool that can give us that introspection is incredibly valuable. And then you and I were talking a little bit earlier on the way up here about the fact that data classification, I would say in general, if you think about, like I think as security guys we run into two things. The application guys didn't know what the application's talking to, and nobody knew, like the data guys kind of knew where the data was, but then especially as end user data and the access to cloud platforms has come up. So we already had a problem, we already had a data problem, we already had a visibility problem, and now we see the velocity of IT just, I think it's going crazy, like faster than it ever has. So now we're all just trying to keep up and do these things. And I think that's really the, we have to, as security practitioners, leverage good platforms, because there's no way that we can keep on top of things otherwise, I think.
And the innovation that buying mature tools brings you, gets you to the market into the new tools faster. Versus if you try to build it, you can build exactly what you need, but you can't do it quickly, and you can't do it as fast as if you were to buy it and get exactly what the industry is bringing.
And you can't, as that business changes, that tool in all probability is going to be a lot more adaptable and change more quickly than something that's homegrown.
Well, they're seeing all the people's use cases, right? So they're not just getting my product feature requests; they're getting his and 100 other people, and a good. Because I think we've all seen platforms that continue to iterate very quickly, and we've seen platforms that are not going to move any. You know, like they kind of do their thing, and they're like, we're really successful, but they may not necessarily have the incentive to move fast. So you kind of have to be. You know, we only have a certain amount of budget to spend on tools. You have to be partnered with a company that's really forward thinking and is excited, passionate about solving the problem. I always say you kind of want your vendors to be as excited about your problems as you are, right? Because if they're not, it's not really a good partnership, right?
Cool. Let me go on to the next question I had in mind, and that's sort of the changing relationship between CISOs and chief data officers. How is that relationship between the chief data officer, the data governance function, and the CISO evolving with the advent of new capabilities around data discovery and classification, as well as management? And do you have any examples of how these teams are working together effectively? Because there can be dysfunctionality, there can be functionality, and it'd be good to understand what's working out there. Addressing things like stale data access, improving data hygiene, ensuring data integrity, enhancing governance, leveraging AI, and basically generally enabling the business to use that unstructured data more effectively. Let me, Brett, address that one to you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, the data officer has not always necessarily been in existence. It was kind of more of an IT function. And so I think generally, which is why, some will say that you shouldn't have the CISO reporting to IT, because there's going to be friction there, because the IT function is focused on availability, efficiency, so they can't have any stopgaps that the CISOs used to, I don't want to say, it is a stopgap, but traditionally the CISOs used to put those stopgaps in, it's like a no, we can't do that, we can't do that. But now as we evolve, it's got to be focused on the business, because the business is in business to make money. The users in the organization are making the money for the business, and so we have to enable that, right? And everybody needs to understand that, including the data officer and the CISO and everybody else. So, I think from a CISO's perspective, I think it's about building those relationships. It's about education and understanding where, look, here's your part, and this is why it's important that we do X, Y, Z, and building those relationships. And I think that'll help close that gap.
I was just going to say, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, too, I think it's required the security teams to be a lot more business savvy than I think, if you roll back 10, 15 years ago, we were really, had our cool guy stuff at the edge, we had cool IPS and IDS, and, it was we could be a little bit less disconnected, or a little bit more disconnected from the business in general. A lot of times if we started a new project, there was a big hump of being involved, and then we kind of went back to, configuring our things and blocking our bad guys. But now you have to be really plugged in with the business. You have to be really on top of the things they're trying to do. And to Brett's point, just be a business enabler. Just kind of understand. It also helps as well because we can be forward thinking about getting ready for what's next.
Cool. I was going to make a comment that traditionally security is always a cost center. Security always costs money. You spend more and more money trying to secure. But one of the things I'm seeing is kind of a reverse trend where the tools that we're using for security are actually now tools that the business can use. Hey, did you realize you're storing thousands of bytes or petabytes of data that you haven't used? So, hey, this tool that's really designed for security has a added benefit of saying there's lots of leftover data that you don't need. There's lots of misconfigurations that, did you realize you're giving other departments this info or other teams or making it public? That now people can start to actually see savings and cost savings and benefits to the business of where they're seeing more people use it and aligning their use cases to what people are looking for.
Cool. Let me direct a question to Brett. Brett, have you managed to improve that relationship with your chief data officer, the data governance function within organizations you've worked with? And where do you find the biggest win-wins?
I guess, like Toby was saying, finding value in what they do, the chief data officer, you can find value. So the chief data officer may be responsible for all the data in the cloud, right? And then, like we talked about a DSPM solution, working with the chief data officer saying, hey, here is all this data, you have access to this tool. Go out there and get a quick win and get an attaboy because you went out and saved $80,000 because you decreased the data that doesn't need to be there. And from my perspective, it improved my my data, not only resilience, but data retention.
Yeah.
So, I can cover those compliance things regarding data retention. So it's a win-win. He gets to look good because he decreased his AWS cost by 80 grand, and I look good because I'm getting a benefit of that not having data out there longer than it needs to be out there.
Do you find there's quite a bit of variation with your clients as far as their maturity around data lifecycle management?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Let me take us on to another topic, which is, whether you're a CISO, CDO, wherever you are, you got to admit you don't know what you don't know. And when it comes to discovery and classification, does your team stare at a data repository and say, hey, does it have something that's super sensitive, the crown jewels, or maybe it's like a dirty socks and it's nothing you need to worry about? How does DSPM help you solve that previously unknown or duplicate or shadow data? And let me direct that one to Matt.
Okay, so we've had a really good success story at the organization that I am at with leveraging a DSPM tool and getting the data team to really operationalize that. So you take the kind of intersection of audits plus the validation and classification that a DSPM tool can do, and you become in a much better spot, because we're talking about sometimes people don't know what we don't know, right?
Right.
So the data teams, which I think are operating in good faith, are genuinely passionate about delivering a good service to the business, right? They're doing their thing, but then we can go ahead and come in and say like, hey, relative to the improvements that we see based on maybe an assessment from an outside company or the things that you see that are found in the DSPM tool. So they can then say like, hey, we're gonna make these architecture changes. Now I will leverage this tool to validate my changes, right? So they're iteratively making it part of their operation cycle. And then also I think a good data team too will also be very mindful about like, okay, they become also an extension of the security team, because they're like, oh, we can see based on an easy feedback, easy to use interface, these are the things that we need to be on top of. So they're kind of proactively getting ahead of, instead of me being the security guy, and when we do our whatever cycle we have around reviewing those things, a lot of times those guys are like, yep, we know, we're working on it. This is where it fits in our current deliverables, and this is when we're going to get this done. So,
Toby, or Matt?
I'll say a hidden measure of how successful you are is when you're the security team and you're always going, hey, did you know you have this problem? Did you know? But when you get a kind of a shift in thinking and they're coming to us saying, hey, we noticed we had security issue here, hey, then you're getting a collaborative model, and you're actually both working towards the same goal. It's a really cool thing that when it happens, it feels really good that, hey, you're not always the bad guy saying, don't do that. We're now working together and we're all achieving the goal together.
sometimes we're like the IRS. Nobody's really excited when security shows up, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And a question for Matt. There's a convergence between data and security, and that CDO, is it becoming the new chief data officer plus security officer? What's happening in terms of the relationship between that CDO and CSO? Are they becoming one and the same?
I think it really, it's going to depend on the organization. Like we're a relatively smaller organization, so we don't always have the luxury of having all the staff for all the structure for all the titles. So I would say I would anticipate that it likely is in a lot of organizations, the CISO is very focused on the things, and the overlap with the data teams is probably more around GRC.
Okay.
I don't know if you've kind of seen some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think what really, it's tough. Like Matt said, it's dependent upon the organization. And some people like to hold things really close to their chest, and that's a challenge. And that's why we need to really try and break through those walls and have a collaborative effort. And, you get a win here, I get a win there, and we decide to work together. But, talking about governance, the governance paradigm has got to shift from top down. It wasn't that long ago when the CEO and the board of directors probably didn't even know who the director of security was, or who the CISO was even. And that's got to change. And with recent events and breaches where CISOs and CEOs are being put on the chopping block, the awareness and the education is becoming more at the high level. So when we talk about governance, that's where the governance needs to start. And if the governance starts there, then it kind of puts the responsibility up there, so that guards can be let down here, guards can be let down there, and we can work as a collaborative team.
Are things like the SEC breach notification rule that came into effect like about a year ago. Is that something that is helping get that sort of alignment? Because now you have to understand what's going on very quickly so you can report publicly. You don't want to report initially and then go back and say, oh, yeah, I said this many breach records, but it was actually this many breach records, and there's other things I didn't tell you about. Is that coming into play with what you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason that came into play is that if you look back at like Equifax, they settled with the SEC for like $700 million, right?
Yeah.
So it's events like that force the hand of the SEC that's forcing the hand of the organization. So it's almost one and the same that with that, now everybody has to determine materiality, right? So that's where they have to dig deeper into their data, deeper into their security posture, and really understand what's going on behind the scenes and be transparent about it.
Yeah. And there's a heavy component of ownership of risk as well. And I think everybody's had to kind of take a step back and be like, okay, who's signing off for what, and where does this fit?
But rewinding to the DSPM conversation, there's incident response, and that's one thing. But is DSPM, those sorts of tools, is that have the opportunity to help in terms of informing whatever decisions arriving around materiality and what you're going to report?
Yes, because if you have an incident response plan, or even like a business continuity plan, and you try to run a business impact analysis for the business continuity plan, but you don't know where your critical data is, then how do you know what to back up? I think people depend too heavily on the resiliency of cloud, the potential resiliency of cloud. So, it's identifying that data that helps pull that all together.
Quick comment on that is now with increasing complexity of businesses, we're starting to use more tools where our data is not just within our boundaries or within our grasp, but we're using tools that, CloudStrike happened. Hey, we don't use CloudStrike, we're safe. Oh wait, some of our critical suppliers do. Now we have to reevaluate it just like it was ours, even though it didn't directly affect us. We needed to understand. And our C-suite now has us on speed dial. They're like, hey, is this going to affect us? What's it doing to us? We're like, well, we don't use it, but we do use these tools that do.
Okay. So you've all made a DSPM decision, and I'm wondering, why was that a priority for your organizations and for you? Was it like a zero trust initiative? Was it compliance? It might have been HIPAA, it might have been that SEC rule. Was it a risk mitigation? Was it a cost savings perhaps? What was the rationale behind that? And Toby, let me start with you on that one.
So the easy answer is yes. I didn't hear a single question that was not a yes. There's so many factors that go into making a decision, and so many reasons. And if you can solve more than one problem with one tool, that's a win. We have so many tools doing so many different things that if you can help the compliance guys with their compliance, and you can help the security posture, and you can help data discovery and all of these things with fewer tools, then it's an automatic win. It also helps with budget. You're not buying 10 individual tools, you're buying one tool that solves 10 problems.
Cool. Any other views, Brett, Matt?
Yeah, so for one, if you look at any one of the regulations, or anyone like NIST CSF, the non-regulatory compliance framework, CIS, they say identify your assets, right?
Yep.
And data is an asset. So when we help clients with this type of thing, to manually identify and classify petabytes of data, I mean, that's all I have to say about that, right? It's difficult. It's almost impossible. So that's where a DSPM solution is absolutely essential. It's a critical tool because you let it go out there and identify and classify your data for you.
On an ongoing basis.
On an ongoing basis.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's as simple as that for me.
Yeah, I'd say same answer from, putting on the architecture hat. If you're trying to roll out a mature zero trust model, but you don't understand your data assets, you kind of have, it's all those foundational things, right? So my take would be at this point, this should be like a table stakes kind of capability. And the data problem is not getting easier. So if organizations are not being forward thinking about getting on top of stuff like this, they're just going to continue to fall behind.
And what are you seeing in terms of where DSPM is going in the future? Is there other functionality you're seeing that you would benefit from? Are there other groups within your organizations that might benefit from it or coming to realize that they can benefit from it? And let me direct that one to you, Toby.
Two comments on that one. First one is whenever you can expand the breadth of your visibility, even if it's in places that you've never been before, the models keep changing, our use cases keep changing. So whenever you have a tool that says, hey, we now also do this other cool new feature, sometimes we haven't even thought of those things yet. Like we're still working on these. Oh, wait, you have a new feature and I can start doing that. It helps you build a bridge to the overall goal, and every piece helps build that solid model that you need. So that was one comment, but then the other comment is escaping me, but...
So I'll jump in real quick. I know how that is.
Yeah.
So I would say one of the things that we're really trying to tackle, so it's great to have the ability to go ahead and assess the environment, absolutely need that. There's also, I think, an inherent challenge around some of the newer platforms in threat detection as well, right? So being able to understand where things are, what they are, and then also being able to have better visibility. Because oftentimes they're really great within their own platform at seeing what's going on. But I don't know how it is for you guys, but how many like tens or 50s or hundreds of platforms are we supporting as security architects and engineers and CISOs and directors these days? So the more that we have good data detection and response, even better if there's some user-based, if I have my little Matt has a dream, some user behavior analytics around identity is kind of like the dream and the goal.
I thought of that second point was scalability. Everything we do nowadays is kind of right in front of us, but if you're not paying attention kind of one step or two steps or three steps ahead of you, that scalability problem will come crashing down on you. And your early architectures of, I'm just going to scan every database. Well, now you have thousands of databases and it doesn't scale well. Or you have, megabytes or gigabytes and now petabytes, and now it's just going to keep growing. And so you need to make sure you have a nimble enough architecture that can handle that scope. And
Yoda bytes.
Yeah, Yoda bytes.
That's the next one. Yoda bytes. Zettabytes, Yoda bytes.
And we joke about it now, but I remember years ago we were like, I'm going to go to gigabyte database. It's so awesome. Right. And now you have gigabytes on your phone. It's something we didn't think of that will be a problem.
I saved up for a year to get my 16 meg SIM chip. Right.
Do you think that's something new to the cloud, or do you think that's just general?
I'm going to say the cloud has enabled it. It used to be that you'd have to place an order and wait weeks or months for new hardware to come. Now, if you want to do it, you're like, hey, I'll click a button and ready to go. And that cloud has enabled that growth, and it's like, hey, save it now. We don't know if we'll need it later. So the databases have grown because we're saving more. We're not being stingy on how we're storing it. Save it for now because who knows when you're going to need it later.
And Brett, did you have a
question? Can I say something on the scalability, kind of what's next? Now the shared responsibility model is really, really critical. Some companies learned that the hard way when they thought that the data that was in AWS is being protected by AWS. But what about our SaaS platforms, right? So we talked about on-premise and we talked about cloud, but what about SaaS? Do we really trust our SaaS providers to know where our data is and to protect our data? That's not necessarily the case. So, expanding into the SaaS realm where we have multiple SaaS vendors where we can reach out and identify and classify the data, actually know where our data is within their platform, is huge, I think.
No, you bring up a good point as well in the fact that oftentimes there is an assumption of the resilience of cloud, and even like, hey, I'm in here, I don't need to have a backup, but when you go and read actually how it works, because a lot of times everybody's trying to spread a lot of a limited amount of staff across a lot of different tools, so maybe you don't always have the cycles that you might have in the past, right? It's like back in the day when you got a firewall, you definitely had to spend a lot of time understanding how that worked. or you were not going to be successful. Now you can just get enrolled in a cloud and head on down the road. But to your point about shared responsibility model, oftentimes if security is not involved enough, the shared responsibility model nuance might not necessarily be understood by the platform owner, right? So security may not be weighing in and focusing on the right configurations. It could be something as simple as MFA, right? So maybe if somebody's got a platform they rolled out, MFA should be table stakes anymore, but perhaps they didn't have that, and I think we've seen that come up in some of the recent platform breaches.
Well, gentlemen, that's all the time we have today. It has been a fabulous,
thought we were just
fantastic
getting
conversation. To the audience, if you want to learn more about data security posture management, DSPM, go to Normalyze.ai. You can also visit the Normalyze booth, and I think you gentlemen will be there, and they have some really stimulating demos and examples you can benefit from. Thank you very much, and have a great day.